Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Yountville Town Council. It is Tuesday, October 19th at 6 p.m. For those of you joining us in council chambers this evening for the very first time, you'll find the agenda and the supporting documents for that agenda in the little plastic bins on the wall next to the door where you came in. Help yourself to that information. We are being broadcast live on Channel 28, and this session will be rebroadcast again on Friday at noon. And I believe we are streaming live over the internet, so you can pick this session up again at your convenience on your computers. While you are in council chambers this evening, we would appreciate it if you would turn off your cell phones and pagers, and so we can avoid interruption and get through this meeting rather quickly. May we have the roll, please?
Councilmember Dutton?
Here.
Councilmember Chilton?
Here.
Councilmember Moeller?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dunbar?
Here.
Mayor Sosserman?
Here. Vice Mayor, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Closed session. We had no closed session. There is no report from that closed session. Adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We will be continuing item number 15, appointment of Yountville Library representative to the November 2nd meeting.
Anything else? Okay. Can I have a motion? Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Item 8 is public comment. Anything not listed on tonight's agenda? If there's anyone wishing to comment about anything. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Item 9, are there any changes or corrections to the consent calendar this evening?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We have for item 9B under the consent calendar, we have distributed a revised California Fire Code and its non-substantive changes to section numbers and adding new section number 15.38170 for corrective actions and 15.38180 for solar photovoltaic systems to the code. And then for the minutes, under council member comments, 14C, we're going to delete the second bullet of Mayor Sosserman's comments.
Thank you. Anything else? Can I have a motion? Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Item 10, presentations. We are going to do some recognitions this evening of outgoing Transportation Advisory Committee members and our Zoning Design and Review Board. And I can see that a few folks are here this evening, so I will come down. The Town Council relies on the support and guidance of its residents to assist the town in a number of ways. We are very fortunate to have the opportunity to say thank you tonight for a job well done to several citizen volunteers who have served on several of the town's boards and commissions. Our community has truly benefited from the many hours contributed by these individuals. Tonight we acknowledge and honor the service of the following members of the Transportation Advisory Committee, or the TAC, and the Zoning and Design Review Board, or ZDRB as we refer to it. First, I would like to present this award to Ms. Donna Hines, who served on the Transportation Advisory Committee from November 2006 to August of 2010 in appreciation of your contributions to the town of Yountville's Transportation Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, to to Carl Nitka, who served from November of 2007 to August of 2010, in appreciation of your contributions to the town of Yountville's Transportation Advisory Committee on behalf of the town of the Yountville Town Council and staff. Next, Mr. Stephen Rosa served from May 2009 to August of 2010 in appreciation of your contributions to the town of Yountville's Transportation Advisory Committee on behalf of the Yountville Town Council and staff. And I just saw Mr. Shute come in. Jim served from October 2009 through August of 2010. And in appreciation of your contributions to the town of Yountville's Transportation Advisory Committee, thank you very much on behalf of the Yountville Town Council and staff.
Thank you very much.
And I don't see Billy. Billy's not here. So we have one more. Billy had served on the TAC for since October of '09 through August of this year, and we'll save that for her, give that to her. And is Marita here? I think Marita is at a high school reunion. And she served on the Zoning and Design Review Board from November of '08 through July of 2010, and we are recognizing Marita as well. We'll get that to her. So thank you to all those people. Council, any comments? Any comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Napa County Mosquito Abatement District Annual Report.
Good evening, council and audience. My name is Stephen Rosa. I'm the town's representative of the Napa County Mosquito Abatement District. I've been your representative for, at the end of this year, 21 years. We've seen a lot of changes in the district. We've moved from our little digs at the old Napa Sanitation Facility in Imola down to American Canyon. Over those years, a lot of personnel changes over the years, and just a lot of progress has happened. Our jobs expanded over the years with the creation of the flood control project and rejuvenation of a lot of the wetlands that are happening in South Napa. And our jobs increased exponentially over the years. I brought with me tonight Mr. Wes Maffei, who is our manager. He's been with us for 13 years now. It just seems like yesterday. Anyway, I'd like to introduce Wes, and he can fill you in a lot of the particulars and the things that we're doing. Okay, Wes.
Well, good evening, members of the council and ladies and gentlemen. It has been 13 years. It's been a lot of fun. And the district did start out, it was very simple. We literally owned a metal shed and 3 trucks when I started here. And it has expanded. We do cover the entire county. We currently have an operating budget of about $1.8 million. It's funded both by ad valorem property tax and also a benefit assessment, which was passed overwhelmingly by the voters in 2003. Our services have also expanded, so it's not just mosquito control, it's also monitoring for mosquito-borne diseases such as West Nile virus, which is present in the county. We also have encephalitis viruses such as Western equine encephalitis virus, which last was detected in 1996 in Calistoga. We also have a tick surveillance program. We are testing ticks for Lyme disease. We have found Lyme disease in a number of locations throughout the county. And just recently, we have also found ticks positive for another disease known as tularemia, which is associated with rabbits. And this is the first time it has been detected in Napa County, and it has been noted near the wetlands associated with American Canyon. So this, of course, has created a little bit of excitement. We've coordinated our efforts with the CDC, and at this point we only have one human case, thank God, but this is what prompted all of this study. And so we will continue to watch for that as well. We also have a Yellow Jacket program, which is very popular, not just with the citizens, but also with parks and recreation personnel, including here in the town. And we also have a program where we will advise citizens about things that they can do to manage issues associated with rodents in and around the home. And so these are now the core programs the district has expanded. We've gone from 4 personnel to 9 personnel. We cover the entire county. And services are usually rendered within 24 hours of a call. If we know we're not going to be there, we will at least contact you and let you know, and set up a time that we can be there. So again, there is a rapid response. We also have a weed control program that is associated mostly with winery waste ponds and wastewater treatment facilities, because we have a species of mosquito that will breed in these ponds where vegetation is near the water's margin. And this mosquito happens to be an excellent vector for West Nile virus. So this has become a really big deal. And this is sort of the core of the district and what we're doing at this point. And I'll just open it up for questions.
Council have any questions? Mr. Maffei?
If I could just ask one question. As we're transitioning into fall and winter and rainy season, is there anything in particular you would recommend the public be looking out for or be doing to try to minimize some of these risks?
Strongly encourage that, again, they look around in their yards. If you have buckets, if you have containers, old boats that are not covered, wash tubs, whatever it is, either turn them over, which is ideal. If you cannot do that, then at least cover them so that they don't hold water. We do have 20 species of mosquitoes in this county. Some of them only breed during the winter. Others breed in the spring, summer, and fall. So we are blessed that it is a year-round deal. It's not like the East Coast where you get a break. Literally, we have different bugs for different times. And so management of the water is everything. If you have an ornamental garden, water garden, or a fish pond, we supply free mosquito fish for these ponds. They can either be picked up at the district office, or they can go to Van Winden's nursery, or to the Ace Hardware up in St. Helena. We have a fish that we give to them that folks can pick up for free. But turning these containers over is probably the most helpful thing. Clean out the rain gutters, make sure they drain correctly. All of these little things that can hold water. This is going to be really big, and it becomes even more important in the spring when people have forgotten, and that's when we start to get a lot of the activity and a lot of the calls.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you
Good
very much.
information. Okay, CAL FIRE, Public Safety Quarterly Report.
Evening, Mayor and Council. For the third quarter of 2010, your fire station responded to 134 medical aids, 5 public assists, 28 vehicle accidents, 2 vehicle fires, 38 alarm soundings, 4 reported structure fires, 3 veg fires, 6 miscellaneous types of fires, a rescue, 5 hazardous materials calls, and 2 tree and power lines. And about of those 228 calls, 77 were in the town, 60 at the vet's home, 89 in the county, and 2 in the city. Still about on average, a little higher on the medicals. On the vehicle accidents this quarter, but still about on average for years past. There's one major event that I'll touch on briefly, but I'd like to come back to it in the end if that's okay, which is a well rescue up in Calistoga, and I'll go back to that in a few minutes. For our PR events this quarter, you may have seen the crew at Washington the Out, and again Washington Mulberry with the boots out. That's part of a benefit for muscular dystrophy for Jerry's Kids. The International Association of Firefighters has taken that as kind of their key or lead cause or lead charity that they donate to. So about this time of year, most departments throughout the state participate And in this particular case, we've been involved now for, I believe, 2 or 3 years. We joined in the cause. This intersection here, or this location here, we raised over $4,500. We had approximately eight locations throughout the greater 6-county area that we cover, and all told, we ran about $81,000, which put us actually second in the state, currently behind LA County. So it's actually a pretty significant accomplishment, and the crew that actually puts it together is very, very proud of what they've turned in, because they're going against much larger agencies and demographics, and they're putting up amazing numbers. So they're actually very, very proud of that. The truck has been involved in a fire science program at the high school. We attended the Focus Barbecue. Done some more fire extinguisher training, kind of our usual PR events to keep us in tune with the town. And at the very end, you see we've listed our some specialized training that we've done at Juvenile Hall in the city. We had another house donated to us, or to the county fire department, up off Silverado Trail, and we did some unique search training in the city. If I could go back to the rescue, Sergeant Belmer and I kind of joke with each other at each of these quarterly reports, because sometimes there's not a lot in there. There's not a lot of meat in there, and we know that. We're not kidding anybody when we come up and talk in front of you. But I'm trying to think of a way to word it when I'm sitting in the back there, and it's hard to quantify a state of readiness. It's hard for us to put on paper for you all the things that we prepare for and that we work hard for on a day-to-day basis to be ready for. Bluntly, we're here if bad things happen. But if bad things don't happen, then it's hard for us to tell you what the heck we do all day. And that's a good thing, but again, it makes it tough to quantify it. Well, this particular call was up, while it may not have been in the town, it involved literally every agency from the county of Napa, the city of Napa, American Canyon, St. Louis City, Calistoga City, and ourselves. And the people that were the lead role in this particular rescue were actually out of your particular station with a unit that's housed at your particular fire station. And the guys at that facility, or the people at that facility, were leads in this particular rescue. A guy falls into a well in the middle of the night. It's an old hand-dug well, brick lined. We have no idea how deep it is, but he's down in the water. And how do you? If you'd asked me, 2 years ago, what are you gonna do if you get a guy fall in a well? I mean, we'll figure it out, but we don't. I don't know. Well, we know. I mean, we know because we've trained for it and we've practiced for it, and we have very specialized equipment, which takes countless hours of training and countless hours of learning OSHA regulations and codes and what we can and can't do, and all while dealing with an emergency. So this very unique call, while it didn't happen in your town, was intimately involving your particular firefighters that are housed here. So I guess in closing, I'm extremely proud of them. The work that they do, it's hard for us to put it into stats, but they train on a daily basis, countless hours, in addition to trying to maintain a presence within the town, in addition to maintaining their equipment, in addition to maintaining their skills, in addition to staying there, and so you have to cook and eat and sleep at some point. All that goes into their day. So when something like this happens, I'm very proud to tell you that they performed admirably. It went off without a hitch. It was a 1 in a million call that we hope never happens again. But if it does, we're ready for that and 10 times more. So it's the same with the law enforcement side of things. I don't want to speak for them, but again, we kind of joke with each other, and I think finally I'm able to give you some meat in this thing that we're proud of. So.
Good. Thank you. Any questions for Chief Parks? Comments?
So apparently it's not throwing a rope down.
No, and that's I don't know if many of you saw the paper, but we took a pretty good beating because people don't understand it's. There may have been a time when you could throw a rope down, tie it to a horse, and just yard the guy out, but not anymore. Like I said, it's not just the tactical aspect of getting them out. You have to know the rules and regs of what we can and can't do, and how many people have to be on backup, and the air monitoring that goes into it. And I could give you all kinds of technical jargon, but no, it's not that simple. And it takes a lot of people and a lot of very specialized skills and equipment. So it's really not.
All right.
Well, if I could just remind folks that we are very fortunate to have two companies here that are highly trained, and we hope that training goes totally unused and wasted as much as possible. But it is great comfort to know that it's right next door. So keep up the good work, and
Thank you.
thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. Sheriff's Department Public Safety Quarterly Report. Top that one.
Hate when he looks like a big guy. I can't really get him that good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, it was a very it was a typical quarter for law enforcement in town. It was busier, a lot busier than most quarters, and that's pretty typical of these months. If you go back over the following years, this is usually our busiest quarter. This is the first quarter we didn't have Chris Roberts up here. He started his new job down in American Canyon as a school resource officer. And as we interviewed the last time, we introduced John Zimmerman the last time. This was his first full quarter working here. John is fitting really well. He likes the town. He likes the people. He's out there getting to know people. He's making a lot of friends and influence with people by writing a lot of tickets. He gave a lot of warnings the first couple of weeks he was here, and then he got to the point where when he started warning the same people, he thought it was time to teach different people a lesson. So it was an education process. We had our annual 4th of July celebration. It went off great, except for the couple of minutes of crazy traffic at the end. There was absolutely no problems. You've seen in the report, our calls for service were up this quarter. We went up from 485 to almost 700. Again, that's pretty typical for this quarter. We're always a lot higher as far as that goes. But it didn't really increase a lot of other things. We only had 2 more arrests than normal. And the report goes only went up by 10. So even though we had a lot more calls to handle, because of the volume of people, there wasn't a lot more specific, calls for, arrests or anything like that. So it was fairly consistent to other years. We had 2 significant cases, and I think what makes them even more significant is both of them were handled by deputies. Actually, both were sergeants, but they weren't sergeants assigned to Yountville. They were sergeants that were working the county area, but were in town and handled calls. It just gives us another idea of how you don't just get 3 of us, you get everybody that works for the county working in this area. Mike Malott, he worked up here for a while, so I'm sure you guys know him. He was in town and he had a call at the Bardessono Hotel for a theft. And he went over, and luckily we have the luxury of, unlike other jurisdictions like Richmond or Oakland where you go take a report, you run in, you get the information, you go to the next call. Here we have the ability to follow that call up and do all the follow-up we need to track people down. And Mike did just that. Bardessono's got a very intricate key card system on their rooms, telling who goes in and who goes out of the rooms at what times. The cards have to be swiped before and after shipped, so no one else could use anybody else's card. So it's very specific. And he traced all that back and identified a person that had entered both rooms, and with more evidence along the way, ended up arresting that person and recovering the items, which were sold and made its way to San Francisco. We were able to track them down to San Francisco and bring them back. So it was a great job by Michael. And then another one of the sergeants, Joe Wilson, tried to make a traffic stop in town at Yount and Madison, and people decided they were going to try to make a little run for it. They ended up in a driveway on Monroe Street, unrelated to the house, and the male, there was 3 occupants, 2 females and a male. The male attempted to bail from the car and run. Sergeant Wilson caught him, arrested him for evading, resisting arrest, and he had some outstanding warrants from Lake County. And all 3 of these people were from Lake County. They had no ties to this town. They just happened to be passing through and passed in front of the wrong person. So And then along everything else, traffic's about the same. We wrote a lot more citations this quarter, if you'll notice. Our parking citations went from 39 to 98. And our regular citations, our traffic citations went from 53 to 133. And this increase basically was, it's not something that we said, hey, we're going to go out and start writing people tickets. Almost all these citations were generated from the amount of resident calls we got complaining about certain intersections and certain areas of town that have problems. So we went out and we basically responded to those complaints, and we spent 2 or 3 days giving warnings, and then we spent 2 or 3 days giving tickets. And it seems to have worked. I'll give it another couple of weeks, and I think it's going to be back to normal, because I don't think anybody in California really does stop for stop signs. It's kind of optional in this state. So, but we'll keep on top of it. We're pretty much acting on complaints from the citizens and going out and doing what everybody wants us to do, and they like to see us out there, and they'll come out and offer you food when you're standing in front of a stop sign waiting to stop for stop sign for a stop sign. So it's been great, and like Michael says, this is what we do. We're ready to do. They don't pay us for what we do. They pay us for what we might have to do, and we're here ready for you guys.
Any questions, comments for Sergeant Belmer?
Is one of those intersections you've been targeting down at California and Washington? Because I've heard a number of residents complain about.
California, Washington, Yonton, Mount,
Yeah.
and then Madison, the stretch along Washington, just north of the hotels. People seem to speed up on their way out of town and blow past that at a pretty good pace. So both speed and stop sign violations are a big thing this last quarter.
Yeah, and since we're looking at having new traffic flow down there with the Yountville expansion, probably need to pay special attention down that end as well.
Yeah, it's always been one of the big intersections. People just tend to roll right through it and not stop in both directions, north and south. So we'll keep it at best. Like I said, we can sit there and write tickets all day long, but the minute we're not there, people are going to drive like they always drive. I know it's not till next quarter, but we did beat the firemen at the chili cook-off. So
Nope. Knew you'd get that one in.
I'll bring it up again. I'll bring it up again next quarter, but I got to at least throw it there now.
You did not beat the public works staff, though.
No, but we're talking people's choice. We're talking what the people like. not the tasteless judges.
Glad our town manager's not here to hear that.
Yeah.
I'd say it anyway. It wouldn't matter.
I'll back up you guys on that.
All
I got
right.
Rod, too.
Good deal.
I did have one question, and I assume you're doing something about it, Boomer, with the new opening of the bike path. Will there be some, I noticed there's a lot of directional stuff. Do you anticipate, one, that'll take a lot of traffic off town, and two, being a little more forceful? It just seems that there's some really blatant bike riders ripping through town there. I mean, not even a
Always has been.
hesitation to
I
stop.
mean, I've gotten to the point where I'm yelling at people now because they don't stop at stop signs. It's just because it happens so much. I think that'll alleviate a lot of problems, but it causes another problem that we're noticing on Madison with the bike paths. Cars are kind of confused, and they're driving to make left and right turns. They're driving into the bike lanes to get where they want to go instead of going past them. So we're going to have to do a little bit of maybe signage or some kind of enforcement education up there, because you see signs everywhere, share the road, but a lot of people just don't get that. And we got to keep on top of it and see what happens as far as that goes.
Thank you.
But they use it as that. They've already started, so we've already had complaints.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 11, public hearing, general plan amendment and rezone. Unfortunately, my primary residence is within 500 feet of this property, so I will have to step down and recuse myself from sitting in on this matter, and Vice Mayor Dunbar will chair this matter for this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. So as the mayor indicated, item 11 is a public hearing, general plan amendment and rezone for 6548 and 6550 Washington Street. And I'd just like to remind folks that this is not about any proposed use of this property. It's purely about the zoning of the property. So with that, may we hear staff report?
The item before you is a general plan amendment of rezone for two properties on Washington. The first is 6548 Washington, and that's the Rossi parcel, and it's currently developed with residential buildings and uses. The second property is 6550 Washington, and that's the Beard parcel, probably more commonly known as the Gates Estates office, and that's a retained use of commercial uses in a residential zoning district. And as you are aware, the Rossi parcel has been before you on two separate occasions recently for a conceptual general plan amendment and rezone, and it incorporated conceptual drawings as possible development scenarios for that property. As Vice Mayor Dunbar just noted, those issues are not before you tonight. They were presented in support of the rezone, but they're not up for formal action, and rather it's the general plan amendment and rezone for a decision. The two subject parcels are within what the general plan defines as Yountville's central business district, and that's Washington Street, bounded on the south by California and on the north by Humboldt. The Beard parcel is located at the northernmost extreme of this district, at the southeast corner of the intersection of Washington and Humboldt Streets. And the general plan provides that this area is generally the town's commercial and civic core. It envisions commercial buildings that have frontage on Washington and create a cohesive building environment that's intended for the pedestrian. The Rossi parcel and the existing residential dwellings represent a break in the general plan vision for this area. And both of the parcels are holdovers from the Old Town Historic District in a part of town that has developed as the commercial core. So the general plan is proposed to remedy this and to bring the parcels into a commercial zoning designation with Washington Street as the center of town. The general plan amendment necessitates a rezone so that the land use designations in both documents are consistent with one another, and the residential scaled commercial district is proposed. That is the same as the abutting property to the south and for most of the remainder of that block to the south. And it would extend the RSC district north to include the two parcels and be congruous with the central business district. And as you are aware, the RSC zone is intended as a transition between the commercial and residential uses in town. It envisions smaller buildings and uses that support the needs of residents rather than catering to tourists. But any future redevelopment of these parcels will be before you at a future point, and they would be required to conform to these new standards. There's also a recommendation that the retail overlay district be extended to parcels north to encompass these two parcels, and that retail overlay applies to all of the properties within the central business district except for these two parcels. The reclassification of the land use from a residential to commercial use requires consideration of the loss of housing, and notably affordable housing. And Housing Element Program 21 of the general plan provides a formula to replace affordable housing that is lost from this reclassification of residential to commercial. And this formula is a two-prong formula, the first of which requires the minimum housing that would be required of the residential development of the parcel. And in this case, that results in a net gain of 0 because the trigger is not met, because the development is not a development of 5 or more parcels or a development of 5 or more residences. The second prong requires that affordable housing units be provided for 1/2 of the full-time employees that are generated by any proposed future development. And at this point, the proposed development is somewhat speculative, although we have seen a conceptual plan. that showed two units. And depending on the number of full-time employees, if this is 5 or fewer, 1 or 2 residential units would be required. This is something that would be finalized during a redevelopment of the parcel with new buildings and new uses, and so it would be before you at that time. The project was subject to environmental review for the general plan amendment, and an initial study was conducted, resulting in a mitigated negative declaration. So the recommended actions before you tonight are to approve the resolution to adopt the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan. The second is to approve the resolution to adopt the general plan amendment from a residential to a commercial use. And the third is to introduce an ordinance to amend the zoning map from Old Town Commercial to residential scaled commercial, Old Town Historic to residential scaled commercial, and to extend the retail overlay.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff from the council?
I need to ask the procedure.
Councilmember Chilton?
Yes, thank you. A procedural question, either Michelle or attachment 3, ordinance number 393-10. Where is that? I did not notice that it was not in my packet previously, which I apologize.
It didn't make it in the package, so.
So can we get an interpretation from the town attorney on whether we should?
If you have a copy that can be made available right now, that would be fine, and if it's available for anyone in the public that wants to see it.
Thank you.
Well, while we're waiting on town clerk to find that information, if I could just ask staff if, once they're finished talking to each other, do you feel comfortable proceeding with this, or do you feel like we need, because obviously council hasn't had that attachment either, how substantial is that omission?
Pretty pro forma, actually, that it describes the change in zoning districts and land use designation. There's nothing in there that isn't reflected throughout this staff report.
Okay. Councilor Chilton, you want to continue?
I think if we can get a copy of it and just have even if it's a 5-minute break so we can all read that ahead of time, I think that's most likely all we would need. That would be my request.
In the interim, if we can continue asking additional questions that staff may, or that council may have of staff. Any others? Councilmember Moeller?
Yeah, I had a question when you're talking about eliminating the retained use of on the Beard parcel when it's converted to commercial. What's the real impact of that?
There's basically no impact with that action. It would continue as a commercial use. However, any changes that would be made to it would be under a commercial zoning district, and it wouldn't be held just to the existing retained use.
To interpret that, they could change the type of business that's there,
Yes.
as long as it still met the commercial zoning requirements.
However, all commercial uses do require a use permit, so potentially it would be before you again if it's different from a real estate type business.
Right. Other questions? Councilmember Dutton, any questions? Really don't. I have 2 questions. The first one relates to the housing potentially lost. I seem to recollect that that is not technically affordable housing by definition of controlled income housing, but it's lower rent housing, so that reaches a different threshold for what we need to replace. Is that accurate?
That's correct. It's not affordable housing in the sense that there are housing agreements that the residents are qualified by the housing authority. It's affordability is really by virtue of its condition. And there is nothing that would stop the owner from scaling the price of those units however the owner wishes to do that.
And how does that differ then in terms of the replacement requirement, or does it change the replacement requirement in terms of if those housing units are lost, is the same requirement, the calculation, is it the same for the property owner to replace those?
Well, Senator noted that even in affordable units, that threshold wasn't tripped until 5 units, and so they're just loss of housing stock, of general housing stock. I'll note that there are many nonconformities on that parcel in terms of parking setback, FAR. If the 25%, just as the lot sits right now, if there were no change in zoning at all, and the lot were vacant and a residential project were proposed there, the amount of total square footage that would be allowed at 25% under the existing zone district is 1,785 square feet. That's maybe a duplex, maybe a single-family home. So there are more units on the lot right now, and that's another nonconformity than would be allowed by the underlying zoning district as it sits right now.
But the property owner would not be required to replace the same number of those units off-site or on-site. They can't do it on-site. They wouldn't be required to then find 3 or 4 other units elsewhere.
No.
They're not obligated. Okay. I just wanted to make that clarification. The other question I had relates to the environmental review. In the last sentence of the report, it talks about 4 mitigating measures that reduced potentially significant effects to levels of insignificance. Can you speak to those
Yes.
issues? Okay.
Those, every one of those mitigation measures are qualified by at the time of redevelopment of the parcel. The actual changing of the zoning status and the land use designation does not trigger any physical change itself, but it sets a stage for redevelopment of the parcel and the impacts. One of them is a standard archaeological, if they find anything when they're digging foundations, or it's standard CEQA language. The others had to do with its proximity to adjacent residential parcels, and that a masonry wall, which we require pretty much in every case now when there's commercial next to residential for a noise attenuation. The other 2 had to do with
The soil?
soils, yeah, geotech report. The soil type that is found at that site are corrosive soils and expansive soils, and that would be actually part of the standard geotechnical correction of the soil condition on the site that would be done anyway before something is built.
So nothing in the environmental review that would preclude development? Thank you.
No, and none of these happen right now either. They, as I pointed out, they only get triggered at time of redevelopment.
Okay. Any other questions from council to staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, and I would welcome the public to speak to this item if you so choose. So would anyone like to come up and address the council about this issue?
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Real quick, just so the record's cleared, the record should reflect that a copy of the ordinance, draft ordinance, has been distributed to council and made available for public.
Thank you. That's ordinance number 393-10. It's been made available. Thank you. Would anyone? Yes, please, Mr. Peters.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of the council. I represent 6548 Washington Street. I want to commend the staff for preparation of a long awaited turn on our primary commercial street to bring the appropriate product that we hopefully we can develop in the future to to bring it in with all other commercial development, that is Washington Street, and a walking arcade as far as I'm concerned. I do have one issue that pertains to these two parcels, both the Beard as well as the Rossi parcel. It's the replacement of housing. The way that it is stated, it is indicated that housing units to be 1/2 of the appropriate amount of full-time employees. It seems to me that if we're going to try to make this our commercially zoned property, whether we're starting out at California or up to Madison, is that we should make it commercial and allow commercial people to do their development. In this case, it's prohibitive as to certain types of businesses that can come in there. If we initially brought forward to you some type of development that would require 2 full-time employees, and let's assume that it was approved, if we became successful and we needed to hire 4 times that amount, are we then posed in a position where we can't hire those people because we only have 1 apartment unit up above? And in order to hire more people, we would then have to build something, which at that time would probably be pointless. With the Beard Plaza, or excuse me, with the Beard property, which is only about 3,800 square feet, if they change use, would they then be required to bring in a housing unit? I don't think it was the intent, and hopefully it's not the intent, to take these relatively small parcels and try to put as much on them. I think it's far better to let a developer bring forth to you a project. You can approve or disapprove the project. But to put some things that are mandated so much that says, hey, this is not really what I intended to do here. I didn't intend to bring housing units to these people. But yet, every housing unit takes up a parking. And that parking pretty much is absent for most of the day. And it can't be used by the retail aspect of it because that homeowner or apartment owner could come home any time. So I think there's a lot of pressure on what we hope, being commercial, is to bring forth service to the locals, service to our visitors, and to bring a finish to a nice path of walking. So I highly recommend that we get approval for that, but I would like the council to really think strongly about forcing housing units on these relatively small parcels. I don't think that was the intent when these laws were passed years ago. It was for larger parcels, and I think that it adversely affects the true development of these. And then if the Beard parcel in the future gets developed, it being even approximately half the size would definitely affect that. So I appreciate the council considering that as part of their approval to either modify or take that out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak to this issue? Seeing no one else, I'd like to ask staff if they could answer what I heard is one question there in terms of the impact of housing on a new development project, and would there be any lasting or lingering requirements beyond that initial development?
The requirement doesn't discuss subsequent development on the site. It talks about the initial change at time of the zoning change only. So I would say no in that case, that it's not followed throughout subsequent developments.
And the requirement to have replacement housing is basically the cost of converting residential scale to commercial, to the cost of eliminating the housing that's currently on the site to make it commercially viable. That's basically the cost of it, is having to replace a portion of that housing.
When there's a strict interpretation of the zoning ordinance and the general plan, however, there is some indication that the intent of those housing policies was to apply to larger parcels, such as the Keller rezone, the Yountville Inn project, the Knight project, because those properties are specifically referenced, and they are of a size where this type of replacement housing is feasible and it works. But because it's not explicit that it only applies to those parcels, there's a presumption it applies whenever there's this reclassification. And Mr. Peters makes a good point that on a small 7,000 square foot lot that couldn't accommodate the replacement housing that's on the site right now and that really wants to be or could be developed with a commercial use, whether all of that can fit and work with the FAR and what the town's vision for this zoning district is.
Thank you. Councilman Chilton, do you have a question, or are you ready to make some comments?
No, I've got a comment specifically on this issue.
Just if I could, I don't think I said that I'm going to officially close the public hearing portion and bring it back for council discussion. So with that, would you like to discuss?
Sure. I would make one, first of all, my general comments are, and I've said this before, that I think that this rezoning does make sense. As to the discussion that we just had, I approach this from the fact that, A, this is a residential parcel right now, and there is no obligation of the town to rezone it and talk about commercial development. I think it's not the right order to rezone and quote-unquote change our existing ordinance by default to say, well, maybe it shouldn't say this or replacement housing. That's what it says. Everybody knows what it says. When this property was purchased, it was purchased as residential, and the request is for commercial. The commercial makes sense, but the rules are what the rules, the law is what the law is, in my opinion. And if we want to change that, I think we should not approve these resolutions and have that discussion and then go about it in that order. So I am fine with approving the resolution and the ordinance as it is, and I think that the replacement of housing should continue to exist.
Councilmember Mueller?
I don't know if this is working or not.
It's on.
Okay, I think I just turned it off. Okay. I also agree, we said, when we discussed this earlier, I think that the historical reasons that led to this being residential, historic residential, I think we all really understood that. And it does make sense to go ahead and rezone that whole strip of property to the RSC, and I was fine with it then, I'm fine with it now. I also agree with Councilmember Chilton that this is what our general plan says regarding housing, and especially in light of the 4 to 5 residents that are there. It's kind of hard for me to remember exactly because one was divided in half. I think especially in light of that the residential requirement should stay as per our general plan. So I'm fine with approving this change in zoning to RSC.
Thank you. Councilmember Dutton?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that, like with everybody, that it should be changed, but I did hear, Sandra, did I hear you say that it's sort of discretionary at this point, if something comes forward?
When it becomes before you for
Yeah, so
redevelopment,
it's not etched
it
in
is
stone,
discretionary.
so to speak. Okay, well, I would say change it and then see what comes forward and then make a decision at that time.
Councilmember Chilton has a question or a comment.
I'm sorry, could you clarify that comment? I assume that you mean the use is discretionary, the rezoning would come forth once this ordinance has 2 readings.
This will finalize the general plan amendment and rezoning. Any future development and the uses, the buildings, and all the requirements that apply then are discretionary.
Thank you.
That's your understanding, correct, Councilmember Dutton?
Yeah, that's, in other words, if they came with a project that didn't have any housing, then it would be up to the council to approve it or disapprove it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And my comments basically match those of the council, that I do feel like it's appropriate that in a reclassification of this zoning that currently has housing as part of that parcel, it's appropriate that there needs to be some level of mitigation for the loss of that use. But I also think it makes sense that we basically finish up this one section of what is, in my mind, clearly a commercial strip along Washington Street. So I would support moving forward with the language as it states. Councilmember Chilton?
Sorry, one comment just based on that follow-up, because I recall this issue coming up related to the rezoning of what is now the French Laundry Gardens property. And there was a question about the affordable housing requirements when that was rezoned, the replacement of the existing housing stock, et cetera. And it was always explained to me that, yes, there was never a resolution that said X, you're going to have to do X number of housing, but it was generally agreed upon when that rezoning was done of this is what the numbers were. And my little bit of concern is I do want to make it clear that I believe by doing this zoning that we are also saying when you come and do a commercial development is you are going to act under our ordinances and replace that housing stock. That's my belief. And I understand that's not in here, but the idea that the council will come back in the future and say, well, it's a great development, we don't need that, that does concern me. Because that just says it's already done. And
But in the example you gave, it was only subsequent to the general plan amendment for that property and the definition of the proposal that at a later time it was determined what the half-time was. In that case, they also had to provide for the affordable housing that would have been constructed had there been the housing project in the previous zone, and also the recouping of the market housing that was lost. So my point is that it wasn't all going forward as a one tidy package at the time of the general plan amendment. Those numbers were determined later when the project was better defined.
And if, does any member of the council have a comment related to the environmental review of this parcel? No? And has council had a chance to review the ordinance that was included and feel comfortable with proceeding? Everybody? Okay, with that, is there a motion to be had to proceed? We have 3 separate actions potentially to take here.
I'll just move the adoption of resolution number 2921-10, adopting a mitigative negative declaration of environmental impact and mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Rossi Beard General Plan Amendment, APNs 036-061-012 and 036-061-015.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? So that resolution is passed. Is there action for the second resolution?
We'll continue here with the adoption of resolution number 2922-10, adopting general plan amendment to revise the general plan land use element to incorporate reclassification of the Rossi Beard parcels from Old Town Historic to residential scaled commercial, APNs 036-061-012 and 036-061-015.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. And the third action.
Well, might as well keep going. For the, this is the first reading ordinance number 393-10, amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map to incorporate reclassification of the Rossi Beard properties and to extend the retail overlay.
And waive the reading?
And waive the reading, excuse me.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Those 3 actions are taken. And with that, if we may have the mayor return. We will be moving on here to item 12, which is a public hearing, citizen option for public safety program. She didn't go home, did she? Thought we lost you for a moment there. We're on to item 12.
Okay, item 12, public hearing, citizen option for public safety program. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, Mayor, Council. This item is requesting approval of the town's COPS grant funding and spending plan for fiscal year 2010-11. The COPS funding was included in the town's adopted budget. The $100,000 grant is relied upon each year to supplement the town's contracted law enforcement services provided by the Napa County Sheriff's Office. The COPS grant is equal to approximately 12% of the total contract cost of $810,000. With the state budget deficit, the COPS funding was in question over the last 2 fiscal years until action was taken to approve a 0.15% vehicle license fee in order to provide a secure source of funding, which is currently approved through June 30, 2011. The recent approved state budget did not address funding for 2011-12, so staff is closely monitoring the state's actions regarding future funding of our COPS grant. But tonight, what we are asking is that this item before you will approve the plan to spend the town's COPS allocation for supplemental law enforcement services included in our contract with the sheriff. And we're asking that you conduct a public hearing in accordance with the government code and approve the resolution to authorize the COPS spending plan for 2010-11. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might
Good,
have.
thank you. Any questions for staff? Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this matter this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for further discussion or action. Does council have any comments?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2923-10, approving the fiscal year 2010-11 Citizens Option for Public Safety, the COPS program spending plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Great, thank you. Item 13, discussion regarding options to reopen the Hopper Creek walking path. Well, before we start with the staff report, I have received a letter from the Hopper Creek Village Homeowners Association from Gigi LaFontaine, property manager for the board of directors. And I'm not sure, should I read that into the record? No?
No.
Good. Okay. Councilmember Chilton, you want to kick this off? Or?
Sure. I brought this up at the last council meeting, and thank you to the council for placing this on tonight's agenda. With the opening of the path behind the Bardessono Hotel and the Arroyo Grande Villas Affordable Housing Project, the desire to have a full walking path along Hopper Creek open seems to be heightened, in my opinion, amongst people I've talked to, including myself. And I had a conversation several months ago, very informal, with one of our town attorneys, Matt Gorman, who's here tonight, simply asking about whether there were reasonable alternatives to what I believe we were given by our prior town attorney of simply cutting down the tree or closing the path permanently. And I always hoped that within our society there's some reasonable level of coverage that we could give to the town and to the people, and still have that path open. That conversation made me believe there were some options out there and that there was some reasonable alternatives, which is what prompted this item. I asked a couple of questions, one of which was, is there a level of, shall we call it, notification to someone walking along the path that there is a tree here, it's been identified, at least in the past it was not a diseased tree, but it's old, it's potentially more dangerous than other trees, although we see other trees fall all the time. Was there a way to give adequate notice and essentially what I would consider consent by that person? The idea that I threw out there was, could you actually put some sort of a small gate there that had a sign that said, by pushing open this gate, you understand that that there is a tree ahead that's been identified as potentially dangerous. And I had the thought, I understand that anybody can sue for anything, but I was visualizing the person in court going, well, Your Honor, I had no idea there was a tree that could fall on me. And then they showed a picture of this sign, the gate that they pushed open. And then everybody chuckles in the courtroom. That was my my Law and Order moment. So I asked that question, and so that prompted the question of, could we relook at this issue? I personally do believe the tree needs to be preserved, but there is a great desire to have that path open, and as well, we have a great tree that nobody can see. So that was my question. Maybe if the town attorney could comment on that. If you can comment on this staff report, and then also on some of the previous legal analysis that the town was given in terms of liabilities and how those relate to each other.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council, what I'd like to do is give just kind of approach that question from the backside and just give an overview of the issue of liability. I have reviewed the prior town attorney's report and prior memoranda to the council on the subject, and it seems that the issue has come up basically from an issue of liability and what the recommendations that were made previously were recommendations based on potential liability the town would face. And so what I'm going to focus on is the issue of liability. There's other issues that might come into play in terms of, preserving this heritage for the town, or just making a decision beyond just what is the town may be liable for. My comments don't really focus on that. I'm just focusing solely on the issue of legal liability. In general, a property owner can be liable for a dangerous condition on his or her property. So if this tree is considered to be a dangerous condition, the owner of the property could be liable if it falls and hurts someone. In this case, the town is not an owner of the property. From what I understand, the owner of the property is the Hopper Creek Village Homeowners Association. And so as the owner of the property, that HOA has potential liability if the tree were to fall and hurt someone. The town has an easement on the property. The law provides that an easement holder also has the same degree of liability. So if the town were just your average everyday owner, there would be potential liability for that tree falling and hurting someone. There's a little bit of a difference in this case because the town is a public agency. In general, public agencies have certain immunities that can apply. They're statutory immunities provided in the government code. The prior town attorney did analyze one of the government code provisions that would come to play if there was an accident and someone were injured by the tree falling, and that was expressed in the prior memo to town council. And the recommendation was that the tree had to either be removed or some other action would be taken because there was that potential liability. Our office has looked at the issue. We have identified another provision in the government code on the subject, and that provision establishes an immunity from liability for this type of situation. This government code section has not been interpreted specifically as to this type of situation. It's been interpreted in somewhat analogous situations to provide this immunity to a public entity like the town. So based on that, those other interpretations, there is the possibility, and in our opinion, the probability that the town would be protected by that immunity. It was not addressed in the prior town attorney's memo. I can't really speak to why it wasn't, but we have analyzed it, and we believe it is something that should be considered. I think, so that's kind of the overview of the legal situation. Is this immunity would be a slam dunk if there was an accident, someone was injured and sued the town? I would say no, because of the fact that this is there is not an interpretation that has applied this immunity specifically in this type of situation. So if there was that type of an accident, I think the town would expect to be named in a lawsuit. This would be something that could be raised as a defense. It's a potential defense, a potential immunity that would protect the town from liability. But it wouldn't. It's not something where the council should think that this is a guaranteed protection from liability. It's a consideration. It's a defense that would be raised. This section also discusses certain things that might be required, one of which would be signage that would warn passersby of this potential danger. And so if the town were to consider moving forward with the hope that this liability under this government code section would apply, we would recommend that signage like that would be adopted. The issue of a gate that Councilmember Chilton noted, all those types of measures would we would recommend would be appropriate to implement, just to basically shore up that defense that would be raised to the maximum extent possible. I also will note that the government code section applies if there was some accident there. The government code section applies both to the public entity and also because we're dealing with an easement that was granted by a property owner, it also protects the grantor of the easement. The grantor of the easement is able to assert the same defense, the theory being that under California law, there has been a policy decision to try and encourage communities to make available recreational areas like pathways, trails, and whatnot. So the law extends that same protection to the HOA in this case. Potentially the HOA then would have that available to them if there was an accident with the tree and they were named as a defendant in a lawsuit. Like I said, we cannot guarantee that this is a 100% defense, but it's something that definitely would be raised as a defense and would give a good argument against any liability. That's the overview of how our office sees this. Like I said, we're focusing more on liability, not on some of the other policy matters. What it comes down to, I guess, it would be a policy decision. So for the item on, as it's worded on the agenda tonight, giving direction to reopen the discussion and kind of explore those issues further would be appropriate.
Good. Thank you for those comments. Yeah.
So just to follow up, thank you, Matt, for those comments. This discussion item does not have any action or resolution associated with it. My suggestion and request is that if the council is supportive of going further and looking at the degree of liability and et cetera, is that this discussion be a direction to staff that our town manager, our town attorney can work together to kind of flush out the rest of these issues. Also, I know that Steve, I talked to him earlier this week, Steve Rogers had a entry discussion with Parsac about their view of that, which is our insurance coverage, and I know that they didn't say no. They said, let's take a look at that and see how that can be resolved. Because obviously if our insurance company says absolutely not, and the town was on full liability and we didn't fully understand what this meant for the homeowners association, I think that would not be a proper course of action. But I do think that a little bit further study and having Steve work on that would be a good course of action.
Any questions for either Councilmember Chilton or Town Attorney? Questions? Vice Mayor?
Yes, and since we're talking about future discussion, these are questions, whether they're answered tonight or I would want to have answered for future potential action. One would be in that hypothetical scenario of the public having to take some kind of definitive action, whether it be opening a gate, whether it be whatever, how covered are all ages of access? Like kids from the elementary school that they could argue, or their parents could argue, they can't assume that risk on their own. So it gets more complicated than just adult access. Could you speak to that, whether minors would still be prohibited, for example, or how that whole thing would work?
That's right. Well, in terms of liability, having some safeguard like that would be limited by its very nature, in that it would protect liability to those who understood it and could have the capacity to be aware of what the danger was and make a rational decision based on it. So, that age is always going to be an issue. I think I mentioned, or we had a discussion with Councilmember Chilton about there's a possibility of designing the access way in a way where only adults, or I guess not children, could access it. So if you had a handle or some type of mechanism that was high up, where only a taller person could access it, not children, maybe that could be something that could be helpful. If it got to the point of a lawsuit, what would be relevant would be how reasonable was the town in providing this safeguard. So if whatever could be done that would make it appear more reasonable would be something that would help to minimize liability. So if there were features in the design that could prevent children from getting through without an adult or something like that, those would be things that should be incorporated if they're reasonable measures. Having a sign is one thing, but the more protective the measures go, the more enhanced the protection to the town will be.
And does our prior action either help or hinder our exposure in terms of having closed the path? Does that basically say we realize this is a potential risk, and by reopening it, are we more exposed than had we never closed it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that has really any would have any downside. The reality is that it's very well clearly explained in the prior reports that it is a potentially dangerous condition. So there's no dispute about that, and that whether it's closed or not, everyone knows it's a potentially dangerous condition. So I wouldn't see that as being a problem. That fact is already clearly established.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay. Maybe one, if you and again, I'll say like the vice mayor, if this is something to answer down the road. We made the conscious decision to close the path, and I said forever, but it was temporary, temporarily permanent. However, it's not as if we put up an 8-foot fence all the way around the tree. I think everybody who reasonably knows or look back there has seen people in the creek. I know of kids who have been suspended from school for getting in the creek during recess. So I know there is some level of access. Not my children. Thank you. Jessica and Liam, I'm not talking about you. But part of my question is we made a conscious decision to keep the tree up, which does say that we know it's a quote-unquote dangerous condition, and there is a level of liability that we are taking even today, even with the measures. And how much would doing this increase that liability? Is it 50% or is it 2%? You don't have to answer that now, but that would be something to consider, is looking even at the current state and saying, yes, if we can say that, yes, we know there are people in the creek at times and kids can get in there, how much different are we today?
Right. Well, I will just speak to that just for the record. The town has undertaken reasonable steps in light of knowledge of this dangerous condition by doing this actions that already have been taken, and by having an arborist evaluate the tree on a regular basis, doing some major pruning, I understand that was done in response to it. So all those efforts, I think, would and should establish that the town has taken appropriate and all reasonable measures at this point. So if something does happen, this is noted for the record for future. And then in terms of your question, we'll be happy to address that further in our future briefing.
Well, I thought Louis was asking this question, but maybe I'll ask it, since I went out and looked at the tree, and you can obviously see that there's a nice path through the ivy going around it to the left. And also to the right, you can also see that people, maybe kids, I don't know who, are going down into the creek. So, by having this big fence up and people going around it, I mean, aren't we in a way increasing more potential hazards? It's going to be raining soon. That creek can go pretty fast. I mean, how does that play into it? We're trying to prevent one, but we're potentially creating additional hazards that we're not foreseeing.
Well, that it's a technical question, really, for staff, I guess, for other staff who would have knowledge if the protective measures that are in place are now creating other potential dangers. That would be something. Yeah, that would be something the town should be aware of, and if that is known to happen, to have been caused by this, then that's something that would need to be addressed.
So maybe they can factor that in when they consider. I mean, I can see on one side the reasonableness of a fence, but if kids aren't restricted from knowing it's a fence, by creating additional hazards, maybe we can consider the plus and minuses of a fence.
I agree with that.
Any more questions for staff?
If I may, one follow-up to this. There are dozens of trees along that pathway. Does this discussion and liability exposure, is it basically even throughout that entire pathway then, where our easement is? So, again, hypothetically, the heritage oak tree is fine, but one of the other trees falls down, and we've reopened that path. Where do we stand?
Well, you would stand in a better position in terms of liability, because if you are not aware of other trees being dangerous, then the potential for liability is minimized. If you have knowledge that the other trees are also dangerous, then that would be a problem. But I don't think that, at least I'm not aware that that is the case. So there would be your likelihood of avoiding liability would be greater in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this matter this evening?
Yes, I'm Carl Nitka, and I'm speaking in behalf of the Hopper Creek Homeowners Association at the request of the president that couldn't be here today, and for the rest of the board regarding the path. I'm not going to get on the legal matter because the president of the board is an attorney, and I'm not going to pretend to say anything in that way. We understand your concern to reopen the path that has been closed for some time, and the danger where the part could accidentally drop to the ground. And we've also noticed that people that have ignored the closed fence, and it clearly shows a path that's going around. Very obvious. But the association still has one major concern, and well, besides, I've mentioned they would like to have one of the major limbs that overhang the picnic area be removed. But there's, beyond that, when the Hopper Creek board gave the right-of-way to the town for the path, they expected to see the town maintain that path, and the path is not being maintained. We have one limb that is being held up by a 6x6 that we feel is in danger. A 6x6 holding up a big limb that's leaning over the path. It's dangerous. We have limbs that are hanging over homes that's touching a house up in front. Number one is on the garage. It's leaning right on the roof. That hasn't been done. We just, we expected that the town would take responsibility for taking care of the path, and but we appreciate your concern, and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Albert Rife, 11 Forest Lane. In the past, I've always enjoyed that path, and I look forward to using it again. It's really a beautiful path, as we all know. I really am more concerned with opening the path, either by taking the tree down or by leaving it stand. If it stands, just my casual observation, it's going to fall down eventually. Like I'll fall down eventually. But anyway, I'm not made out of oak. But I do wish the town council would resolve the issue so that the path is open so that we can enjoy it again. As far as the liability is concerned, from what I've heard here, you can rest assured that if anybody's injured, any plaintiff's attorney is going to go after the deep pocket, which I'm afraid is going to be the town of Yountville. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Good evening, Council. My name is Claire Lindauer. I live at 25 Forester, and if anyone looks at the tree, I do. But I also, as everyone knows, walks this town every day. And I really would appreciate, I would rather, the tree to me is renewable, even though it might be old. It's only 4 times older than my husband, but I think that if the path was opened, I think so many people could use it. It would just be great. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Lori Cagwin, 11 Jasmine Street, Yountville. I'm a member of the tree committee, the ad hoc committee that worked for quite a while on trying to come up with a solution that would keep everyone happy, which obviously hasn't. I was exposed to the tree when I used to bring my children to school that way, and was absolutely amazed at the size of it and the diameter and the age. And I've done a lot of research on the tree, which I brought with me, which is a tree storyboard that should have gone up but hasn't, that describes why the path is closed, and for people to be patient and understand. But it hasn't made it up, so I brought it with me if anyone wants to look. There's history of 300 years in Napa Valley, and how the tree started out when the Indians were around, went through a few wars, the development of the town, and the tenacity of the tree, which reflects the tenacity of all of us. So it's a symbolic reference, in addition to an amazing natural phenomena that a tree this old could survive so long. I think one of the reasons it's still doing well is because it's on the riparian corridor. And this valley oak does well with water available. Not only has it survived because of the underground water at the creek, but it also helps to stabilize the creek, in addition to keeping the riparian habitat healthy. The chipmunks, the fish, the birds, they all rely on this tree. The birds help take the acorns from the tree and pollinate other areas. So Unfortunately, with the path closed, it's difficult to enjoy this tree, which is the reason I even knew about it. And the only reason I know it's still around is I also walk every day, but I walk different ways through the Adventist parking lot to just check on it to see if it's still standing. And I know we had a rough winter this last year, a lot of wind, a lot of rain, and it survived. It's been surviving a lot of tough climatic conditions for 300 years. So I've also met with other arborists other than Bill Pramick, who have recommended that it's in good shape, and as long as it's pruned and taken care of properly, it will live along a lot longer, even 200 years more. Some of these trees live 500 years. This one's at 300, so it's about 2/3 through if it survives that long. Anyway, I'm here to show support for the tree. I agree it would be wonderful to have the path open, but I wouldn't want to lose the tree with the path open. So it's a hard decision to make. I'm happy to assist in any way I can, and us all work towards a resolution. So thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Leave that with the clerk, and she'll take care of it.
It's before the path is open, and if the path is closed or if the path is open, these boards, there's two sets.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Will Hanson. I live down at the ranch. I was going to save my comments because hoping that the issue would be opened again, then I could talk at that time. I also am a walker, and a little in difference to the last speaker, I think the trail should be opened even if you have to remove the tree. I said that a year or two ago. I have noticed signage down on the cliffs, would be west of the Golden Gate Bridge on the south side of the bay. The signage says, proceed at your own risk. Don't get too close to the cliff. You might fall off. You're responsible for that. So I know other cities do it. But, and I'll save the rest of my comments till later. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
My name is Carla Reif. That's R-E-Y-F-F, 2 F's and 2 Franks. I'm at 11 Forester Lane in Yountville. I can see both sides of this issue. I was driving down Highway 29 when that tree fell down, and I was within minutes of being hit by it last, I think it was about a year and a half ago. So I can understand the fear and how terrible that the terrible results of that kind of a thing happening. But I also like an oak tree as much as the next guy, and but here's an oak tree that we can't touch, we can't sit under, we can't really enjoy. That's going to be just there, locked away from us. Therefore, we can't even enjoy the path. And I would suggest or hope that, or at least in my opinion, I would hope that you would open the path. And if that means to have to prune the tree back more or prune it back considerably more, eventually with the idea of taking it out when it can't survive anymore, I would be in favor of reopening the path as opposed to the tree. Thank you. And I do agree with my husband that you are going to be the deep pockets in this issue. I think most people would.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Rob Winterberg, 5A Burgundy Way. My comments are, I'm a tree person and a path person. I think we can find a middle ground here where we can open up the path. I think it was a great observation. There are plenty. I'm a hiker, avid backpacker, and there are plenty of places I've been on state property, city parks that are much more dangerous than this path. So I feel like other municipalities and government agencies have been able to figure out the law around this to protect them, and I feel like we should be able to do that as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comment on this matter? Open the path? Cut down the tree? Don't cut down the tree? Anybody? One more comment, Carl?
I have one more, be able to make one more comment. I recently had, we had a horn, I think they're yellow jackets or they're there are bees, the bees that go in the ground, I'm not sure what they call them, that we had to call the county out, and they spray for that. And he determined that these bees were coming from that tree. He felt there could be several nests that are in that tree, you know, and that was the county man, and he said he wouldn't go near it. He was afraid it would come down, you know. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public comment, bring it back to council for further discussion and direction. Councilmember Mueller?
I just want to say I look forward to receiving a staff report giving us some possible alternatives so we really can open that path. I think the additional information on the liability clarification was certainly new poignant information. So, and also, you know, what possible mitigating things we need to do, signage, gate, no gate. I mean, I'd like to see a very simplistic plan, a medium plan, and then the more severe plan, so we really have something, some reasonable choices to make to open the path back up. Also in that next report, I know it's kind of gotten lost after our last discussion, but I think it'd be useful for a lot of people to actually see the tree trimming plan. I know shortly after we closed the path, some branches were trimmed. So my understanding, it was going to be trimmed 2 to 3 times over 5 to 6 years. So I think it'd be useful for everyone to see how much has been trimmed, if there really is a plan when it's going to happen for the arborist second and the third trimming. I think that's going to help the Hopper Creek people as well. And that may even deal with their picnic issue. If a big branch over their picnic area is going to be trimmed in the plan, then they may not even have an issue here. And also I think it'd be nice to maybe this is a ministerial act. I'm not sure if that's in whose department that is, for those ancillary trees on the path, for that to be, I don't want that to kind of fall off the radar screen either. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Chilton?
I concur.
Any comments, Bill?
I think what we've heard is that, yeah, everybody would like the path open. I think they also, majority of the people like to keep the tree or not. So obviously somewhere in there, I think, is a happy medium. I do think if you're going to say we're going to completely not have any risk, then you might as well just close everything up, period. I mean, that's all we seem to live in nowadays, is how are we going to avoid risk? We're going to, try to go to the airport anymore. So, I mean, there's just some of these things that you have to accept and do the best you can, but to just sort of let it control you, I don't think is the right thing to do.
Good. Thank you for your comments. Vice Mayor?
I agree that we'd definitely like to see more detailed, structured discussion about it. I think that the point that our current attorneys have made about the immunity of a public agency is pretty critical. And the other piece to that is equally critical is the fact that that umbrella extends to the Hopper Creek Condo Association, at least in some degree. And that part, having been on this ad hoc committee for over a year, I think, in discussions, that issue never came up. It was always cut it down or don't cut it down. It's 100% you're exposed or not. So we basically have new evidence. We said all along that we would take different action if circumstances changed. I think the circumstances have changed. So I would absolutely support us having this discussion. And sooner rather than later, since we are getting into, I know that the rainy season isn't necessarily the time that a limb can fail in the summer as well, but certainly with storms coming, we want to see what we're up against.
Okay. Well, I concur. I think this council made the best decisions it could with the information that we had at the time. And that was to save the tree and do all that we could to minimize the risk, and there was a level of risk that we were willing to take. Closing the path was one of those options, so I would really like to see the path reopened. And under the circumstances, given the new law and the case law and the code sections, I think there's a real possibility that we can accomplish that and save the tree. And it's like Lori said, what's the point of having this beautiful tree preserved if you can't enjoy it, if you can't see it? And that's my sentiment, and I believe that we should direct staff to work on those reports and hopefully come back with an alternative that we can all live with. Did you want to say something?
I just want to thank the council for bringing up this item, and I look forward to more discussion on it.
So I would suggest that we all consider alternative 1, direct appropriate town staff to provide alternatives and approaches to reopening the Hopper Creek path, including the re-examination of the oak tree by the town arborist, dialogue between the town manager, town attorney, with representatives from PARSAC, et cetera, et cetera. Does council concur?
Yes.
And if I could just, I would like to extend that to include some representation from the Hopper Creek condominiums.
Of course.
In
all
that.
Parties involved.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Staff has sufficient direction.
Yes.
Okay, item 14, discussion regarding establishing a council library ad hoc subcommittee to work with the county regarding options to extend the hours of operation of the Yountville Library. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you. At the October 5th Town Council meeting, there was a brief discussion of the council goal to increase library hours. And Steve is the town manager has prepared a staff report that reviews the difficulties with the county adopting a new cost allocation model, and which resulted in a cutback in hours and a new price structure for annual costs for every library hour that we would want to increase by. And the direction of the council after that discussion, that brief discussion, was to come back with a council ad hoc committee, or establish a council ad hoc committee to meet and discuss the library situation with the Napa City County library system to find a mutual solution to increasing hours of operation. In the report that the town manager prepared, he notes that the upcoming election may result in some new seats being filled, or seats being filled on the council, and suggests that perhaps waiting until after the election to appoint the committee may be in order. Or if you wish to proceed tonight, go ahead and appoint members. But they are, I believe, 2 members that would be involved here, and we have, so those are the options really in appointing members, to wait until after the election or go ahead tonight.
Okay. Does council have any questions for staff?
Well, I'll make a quick comment. I did speak with Steve before he left from Michigan about that last comment about waiting. I'm the only council member not retiring or not running for something this fall. He was fairly adamant to me. I don't know if I agree with him in full about trying to wait. He said we're talking about a couple of weeks to appoint a committee. I think his concern was the continuity of starting and then the library commission seeing someone new. I'm not sure if that's I don't want to wait for this issue is my flip side of that, but Steve's not here to say that, so I will reiterate the fact that he did say that to me. So I'll just throw that in.
Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this matter this evening? Seeing no public comment, bring it back to council for further discussion. How does council wish to proceed?
I think this is very important too, and there's even going to be changes on the Napa County supervisors potentially too. So I think we should start moving on this. I agree with Councilmember Chilton as soon as possible. I'd be more than happy to volunteer to be on this committee and start the ball rolling.
Any other comments? Councilmember Dutton?
Well, a couple, obviously I won't be around, but I did bring it up, and only because of a number of concerns that were brought forward. And I think, and I would hope to all of us, it was extremely troubling to hear the comments from the county in regards to the speech or presentation we heard. And then my worried part of it was nothing happened, and I was almost thinking, my God, silence is going to equal acceptance on their part. But unbeknownst to me, I guess Steve has been talking with them, and I just, there's something wrong, let's face it. I mean, there's no way it should operate the way it is, and I don't know what it's going to take, obviously, but I think you're going to have to go in, with your guns loaded, and also I think obviously have a few people on the Board of Supervisors who are willing to listen to you, and I do think they're on their side. I mean, they've taken a hit elsewhere. It's just sad to see, just combination of everything. I mean, we got a new library, then we lose the librarian, this whole new procedure. I mean, it was just sort of like a perfect storm hit us. The one good thing, and I'm glad the council said, look, we're not giving in to that, and we're going to hold our money back. We're not going to just spend it foolishly. So we did not spend the money, and I hope everybody realizes that. But, I mean, there's people out there that'll work. I was very disturbed when she said, we don't have any qualified people. It could be volunteers. I totally disagree with that. So I think there's a way to do it, but whether we get something going now or wait till the 7th, I mean, that's really something beyond me. But I do think whatever we do, you're going to have to go in there with your ducks in order, and because, I mean, obviously they know you're coming now, so to speak. So they're going to, but I don't think they'll be any better prepared. So I shouldn't say they'll be prepared. They won't be. They've just got some real tough questions I think they should be able to answer, and I don't think anybody's really, throwing it at them. I think they're just rolling over, and I don't think they should.
Vice Mayor?
Well, I think I agree that we're going to have a series of council committee assignments that are going to need to be reappointed, reallocated. So I don't feel strongly one way or the other about proceeding right away or not. I would fear I have some of the same hesitancy that Councilmember Dutton just expressed about whether our supervisors would be in a position to act right away on our behalf, but it might be worth continuing the conversations that our town manager clearly has already started. But I would just strongly urge our committee to look for solutions and not just kind of gimmicks around the existing situation, but real proactive solutions to make it work for Yountville. Similar, I think, when Councilmember Chilton and I worked with the school board, they responded when we brought ideas to them to discuss, and it wasn't an attack. So I think we need to take, this ad hoc committee needs to take the same approach of explaining the situation, bringing some solutions, and maybe those come from volunteers from the public too. Because I know that we took some feedback from parents that gave us some information that we could then present. So, but I'm fine with moving forward now. We're going to have to potentially change the membership in a few weeks, but that's okay too. We all seem to be supporting the idea of getting more library hours, so I don't think it's going to be a philosophical shift.
Well, I would say I would nominate Councilmember Dutton, who would probably kill me for saying that. So I either if you're interested in doing that for the next period, if not, I think all of us, as the Vice Mayor said, are passionate about it. I will volunteer to be on that committee as well, so.
I appreciate, I don't think it'd be appropriate if I did. I mean, it's going to take a lot longer than a month to get going. So it should be somebody that's going to be here, and I think that's just the right thing to do.
So is council ready to establish the ad hoc committee?
I'll make a motion that we nominate council members Moeller and Chilton to be our ad hoc representatives.
I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? None. That motion carries. Great. Go get them. Item 15? Oh, Library Commission, that was continued to the next council meeting, which was November 2nd. Staff informational reports, do we have any? None?
Yes, we do. One, there was a electrical outage planned for Saturday. This is related to the undergrounding of the utilities on Yount Street in front of Town Hall between Fennell and Weber. There's several of the property owners that were affected by this have requested this be extended or delayed until December. So PG&E is, as last we heard, canceling this and rescheduling this for probably a Sunday in December. So just wanted to get the word out. We just heard late this afternoon.
Oh, the one that was scheduled for Saturday's been canceled?
Yes.
Hope to shall.
Graham, are you guaranteed that they'll be ready to go in December, or are you pushed off the calendar possibly?
Well, the problem with December is that if we have winter storms and they knock down trees and the power lines, then PG&E gets pulled off to work on that type of emergency work. So we were trying to get it done before the winter season, but it's also a very busy time of year for lots of businesses in Yountville.
Yeah, and I know I got a notice of another one, Graham, that's for Tuesday, October 26th, beginning at 10 p.m. and continuing through Wednesday, October 27th, until 6 a.m. So they are planning to do all the work at night, overnight, and I'm just wondering why they can they not do the same thing for this the other planned outage?
Right. The one out here is something that they have 3 crews and they need to do it with daylight, so they want to do it during the daytime. Sounds like the switchover for that planned outage can be done at night.
Yeah, they're going to replace an electric power pole at night.
Right.
Okay.
So probably a smaller crew and something they can do at night, which hopefully will be the least disruptive to the public.
Okay. Any more staff reports? Okay. Council reports. Flood control will meet, did not meet today. And the next meeting, I believe, is the first Tuesday in November, November 2nd, or possibly November 9th. NCTPA is going to meet tomorrow. And NICLOG.
I attended NICLOG this past Thursday. I was the only representative from Yountville. We still beat St. Helena. I want to point that out. What can you do? The speaker for the NICLOG event was a representative of the Institute for Local Government, which I think typically would be a little more of a dry topic, except for the scandals in Southern California with local governments not fulfilling their responsibilities to voters. The Institute for Local Government has a wealth of resources online about effective and good governance policies, so I would encourage anybody to take a look at those. And I have a great degree of confidence in all the jurisdictions, including ours in Napa County, all work very responsibly. There was 2 items of business on the NICLOG agenda, which I've never seen in my life. One had to do with the proposal to modify the meal allowance that was needed for these events because it's been too low. That one was sent back to the city managers at the request of Diane Dillon. So that will go forward. And also there was a question about the quorum rules with NICLOG, which the NICLOG bylaws are very either fuzzy or contradictory. So that also is sent back to city managers to try to resolve in the next meeting or so. I think the next meeting actually is in St. Helena in the new year after the election. That's it.
Any other reports, comments? Any other reports, comments? Vice Mayor?
I do have one announcement I'll share from the county, and then a couple of comments. Folks may have read in the local newspapers also about a newly formed Napa County Local Food Advisory Council, and they are seeking volunteers to participate. It's the advise the Agricultural Commissioner and Board of Supervisors regarding the development and promotion of a sustainable local food system and help set priorities for sustainable food production in Napa County. So I think we all would encourage any members of the public, and I know I've spoken to 2 of them already that are interested, but they can contact the county. And let's see, phone number for that contact is 253-4421 at the county office. And I just also wanted to make a few announcements, since this is, I believe, the first time we've met since the state budget was finally 100 days late signed, and a few items of interest locally. One, there was a governor's veto that stayed in place that denied, basically all the state legislators were supporting allied councils at veterans' homes to be able to represent the entire membership in Sacramento. But the, excuse me, even though I think it was a unanimous approval by the legislators, that the governor chose to veto that, and there's going to be an effort next year to try to change that so that allied councils can represent as kind of one voice in Sacramento issues that pertain locally to our veterans home. Also, there was one shining light that we saw in the state budget. $1.3 million was it managed to survive for the Pathway Home program. And I know our Assemblywoman Noreen Evans was a key proponent in Sacramento, as well as all the staff with the Pathway program. So that was a huge win for them. That's 1 year's operating revenue. That's going to make a substantial difference for that Veterans Care program. Also, I will be representing Yountville as the first vice president of the North Bay Division of the League of California Cities down at a policy setting and priority setting meeting down in San Diego in mid-November. So I'll have a report after that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, because it's been a topic of conversation these last few weeks, there was an effort by online travel agencies to basically piggyback on other bills that were trying to get approval in Sacramento, and they were trying to sneak in a bill that was going to allow them to pay less transient occupancy tax than they are required by law. And there was a real call to action by the league representatives and our legislators, where we kind of pounded them in Sacramento so that they would not let this thing through, and we were successful in stopping that effort. It's the second time it's happened this year, so that's something that we need to be very diligent about, because clearly with the majority of our revenue coming from hotels and sales tax, that's critical that we protect our revenues. So those have just been some things happening in Sacramento and through the League of California Cities.
Good. Thank you for those comments.
I have one more about the bike trail, unless you're going to mention that too. Okay. Graham is still here too. I just wanted to make everyone aware that we're going to have the official opening for the bike trail this Thursday at 3:30, and everyone should meet at Madison in California, that part of the trail. Is that correct? Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Tilton, you had another comment?
I'm just remembering I showed up at California in 29 for the groundbreaking, and that didn't work so well. If I would like to make a request. The next council meeting, I know Michelle made a reference to this earlier. The next council meeting is Tuesday, November 2nd. I think the mayor is going to refer to that as Election Day and have some information on that. As completely possible, if that agenda is extremely light, what I thought was a light agenda is still 8 o'clock. And I think it's appropriate and fair for all of the candidates and for the public to have that meeting be essential town business and nothing else. So I would like to make that request.
So noted, and it will be. I just want to make a brief comment on the election information. The town of Yountville has been converted from polling place to vote by mail precinct. For the November 2nd, 2010 general election, county elections has converted your polling place to a vote by mail precinct for the following reasons: to offer you the convenience of voting by mail without having to request a ballot for each election, to avoid congestion and delays at polling places on Election Day by better utilizing our voting system resources. So, therefore, you should have already received your ballots by mail. Mailing in your completed ballots, vote by mail voters who have not mailed their ballot by Friday, October 29th, can deliver a completed ballot or replace a lost or spoiled ballot at our vote by mail assistance centers. And there is one located in the town of Yountville, which will be at Town Hall, 6550 Yount Street. And the hours of operation for that Vote by Mail Assistance Center will be Saturday, October 30th from 8:30 to 4:30, Sunday, October 31st from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m., Monday, November 1st from 8 to 5 p.m., and Tuesday, November 2nd from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So you want to make sure you either get them in the mail or get them here on those days during that time period. So other than that, I was going to mention the ribbon cutting for our bike path, and I hope to see you all there, and hopefully our weather will hold out. Ride your bicycles, because we're going to take a little ride, little mild jaunt through Yountville on the bike path, and I've been hearing nothing but great things about it. So any more council reports, comments? Okay, item 18, future agenda items, Festival of Lights permit approvals and ad hoc design review. So hopefully we can put that off until the November, December, January meeting. Item 19, adjournment. We will see you all on November 2nd at 6 p.m.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.